In this presentation, I will introduce my attempt on examining combination of incremental game mechanic and the digital game storytelling, and the corresponding findings through the iteration test. An incremental game is one type of idle game. It consists of game elements in which the main loop is the core mechanic. In such a game, players repeatedly click to accumulate currency, and it eventually requires less and even no interaction as the game progresses. The current game narrative theory has pointed out that the narrative is constrained by game mechanic, thus form a coexisting relationship. In the narrative quality of game mechanic model, researchers further argue that narrative can be formed in the conventional way, so-called things happen in sequence, or it can be aesthetic and poetic focus based on the player's behavior and game mechanic. The study illustrates this point by the game Paper Please. It shows that how check and stamp on people's passports, such a minimalist mechanic, can also be used to tell stories. Another study on incremental games specifically pointed out that phenomenon of paradigm shift has the narrative potential, for it progressively disclose more aspects of the system to be manipulated and create a spine dynamic that helps deliver a sense of narrative. Based on what I had learned from incremental game and narrative series, I formed an incremental narrative framework that highlights three principles. First, development of story should follow a positive rate of change, as it is nature of main loop mechanic. Second, plot of story should be unflawed based on the quantity change. That is to say, I need to lay the incremental structure and define what is going on when the currency is at 100, and how it is different from when currency is at 3000. And finally, we can use incremental element to carry out the story text. In the current project, I use achievement system to display the context, as it is form a delay of gratification. Based on the incremental narrative framework guidance, I used the degree of automation as a way of layering, and I established a four-stage incremental structure based on the level of automations. The energy and the material in this game are both primary currencies. The material is able to convert to energy depending on the specific requirement. Both material and energy can be spent to unlock new research or upgrading existing technology. Finally, I am able to elaborate the concrete story content around the structure of each incremental level. And this illustration shows different development stage from function formation and brainstorming to the first prototype building. Referring to the playtest, I used the story quality index, which has 6 dimensions, a narrative comprehension questions, which has 4 difficulty levels. A higher the level, higher the understanding demand. It is also worth to mention that the game has a science fiction setting, thus I used the demographic questionnaire on sci-fi ratings to test participants' science fiction preference. There are 3 things I changed during the iterations. Participants report that right-click can be redundant and less intuitive for seeing the text, thus I assigned different functions. Now player can directly see the text by moving over an object. Player also report that manual clicking stage is a bit longer, that caused an incoherent considering the rest plot development happens in a totally different speed. So I limited the length from level 0 stage from 18 minutes to 12 minutes. In addition, I designed an instruction page to guide participants to pay attention to the narrative. The testing result from 3 generations does not show a significant difference. In order to gain a better understanding, I divided science fiction group preference into 3 groups. When I zoomed in the middle group, which is a thesis group, I located almost significant difference that the iterated version are slightly higher than the prototype in both level 1 and level 3 comprehension question. Also, players' feedback on story qualities from all 3 generations suggests a strong, engaging, and above moderate imagery story experience. In testing of science fiction preference, I located a positive correlation between science fiction acceptance and the story quality perceiving, as well as the narrative comprehension performance. Beyond our attempting on testing hypothesis, I observed that the story quality and narrative comprehension also showed an above moderate correlations. Interestingly, among the story quality test items, engagement and memorability are moderately and positively correlated with narrative comprehension, which may suggest that engagement and memorability are more related to the narrative comprehension performance in general.